Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hande Sarantopoulos from the Communications Office. Welcome to our 7th and this year's first presidential lecture. It's featuring a very special guest, one of the world's most distinguished academic leaders, and a name familiar to our university, Professor Dr. Subra Suresh. Welcome to him. Professor Suresh will deliver 2 consecutive lectures in a single integrated program designed as a coherent intellectual journey. It's a first for us, so we're really looking forward to that. So the session From Intelligence to Impact is structured in 2 complementary parts. The first lecture, Deep Learning from Nature and Machines, explores how intelligence emerges in both biological and engineered systems, bridging insights from nature and modern machine learning. Following a short intermission designed as a moment for reflection and conversation and network and dialogue, the second lecture, Innovation 4.0 for Humanity 4.0, explores how these insights can translate into responsible innovation that serves society and shapes the future of technology. We will have time for questions after each lecture. I now invite our president, Professor Dr. Metin Sitti, to introduce our distinguished speaker. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce our today's speaker. Professor Subra Suresh is very special to me. I haven't told him, but let me say how I knew him when I was a faculty in the United States. When I was a fresh assistant professor, I was invited to one of the NSF workshops at MIT, and at that time he was the dean at MIT, and he gave a talk. And from that talk, there was a part that I remember all the time is, because at that time I was asking, like, well, how can we measure, let's say, performance and promotion of a faculty with different criteria? And he gave a very clear message in his talk. The best way to have measure someone's performance is how much impact the person creates. And that always resonated in my mind. That all the time we need to both work to create impact, both scientifically, socially, economically, and also measure the impact for the success of our professors and everyone. So also I overlapped with him slightly when he was a president at CMU. So and it's great to see him now here, and it's very nostalgic to see him here today. So Professor Suresh has so much recognition, but very small bio about him. I mean, he has a long list of things to mention, but he is from IITs in India, I think Madras or IIT Madras, and then he did a PhD in US, and then became professor at Brown, and then moved to MIT and became the dean. Then he was recruited as the NSF director, as you know, National Science Foundation. He was directing it for some time. Then he moved to Carnegie Mellon as the president when I was also there. And then Nanyang Technological University in Singapore recruited him as the president. So in that sense, he has been around the world, and now he's back to Boston area, where he's one-never Bush Professor Emeritus at MIT, and also Professor at Large at Brown University. And so he received so many recognitions, the most important ones, some of them to mention. As you know, in US, national academies are the most prestigious. There is National Academy of Science, Engineering, Medicine, and there's also now Inventors, but he is member of all 3 of these national academies, which is, there are only 20 people in the world who has all these 3, and he is one of them. Also, he received the National Medal of Science from Biden, and as you know, the Medal of Science is the highest recognition that any scientist or engineer can receive in the United States. And I saw his picture on his wall last week, so with the Biden, and really great memories. And in that sense, his pioneering work has both in the sense of research, bridged engineering, physical sciences, and medicine, while his leadership has shaped global research, innovation, and higher education at the highest level. He also received the Cavalier of the Legion of Honor recognition from the Republic of France by the President of France, and also the Padma Shri, one of the top civilian honors from the President of India. So it's truly an honor to host not only a distinguished scientist and institutional leader, but also visionary whose leadership has strengthened some of the world's most respected universities and research systems. So I'm sincerely thankful to Professor Suresh for being here with us today, and will deliver 2 great talks. And also, he is our Board of Overseas member, and there also he has been giving a lot of great feedback and suggestions for us to help shape the future direction of our university. So in that sense, let's welcome, and please join me in welcoming Professor Subra Suresh.
So thank you, President Seti. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be back at Kochi University. The first of the 2 talks is going to focus primarily on a technical side, but geared to a general audience. I've given this a few times in different venues, in different places. So the idea behind this first talk is simply the following. We have, for the last 20 years or so, major advances in things like nanotechnology, computational science and engineering, a variety of devices, of miniaturized devices up to the nanoscale that have had impact in engineering, science, and medicine. We also have had fields like biomimetics, which is essentially mimicking nature to learn from nature so that we can create engineering devices out of what nature has always done, and we still fully don't understand it yet. All of this has been moving along quite well and very rapidly over the last many decades. But add to that, starting around 2000 or so, advances in computer hardware and software essentially made the Human Genome Project successful. So computational hardware and software advancements have significantly expanded every branch of science and engineering in ways in which we could not have thought of. But more recently, we also have major leaps in machine learning, AI, data science, and many other fields. So we are at a point of convergence where we can do things that we could not have done 5 years ago. For example, a machine learning program taking 2 very different fields and putting them together in a very short period of time, much faster than humans can possibly do, and extracting out of it meaningful information that we can use to advance fundamental science. So there are so many positive and negative aspects to artificial intelligence, and I'm going to focus only on the positive side of intelligence and pose a lot of questions about intelligence itself. So that's the focus of the first part of the talk. And then the second part of the talk is it's more about innovation and entrepreneurship. So that's essentially the plan for this afternoon. Let's see if this works. Okay, good. I'm going to start with nature. So the first example is the plant called Venus flytrap. So this is common in North Carolina. And Venus flytrap is a plant which is a carnivore. It actually eats insects. And it can open and shut. And you see here the Venus flytrap plant with a little insect inside it. And the plant has hair-like features that you see. The remarkable thing about this plant is that if an insect comes inside and triggers hairs, so touches the hair of the plant, the plant will count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it will shut. If 5 hairs are triggered, the plant will shut closed and essentially release juices that kill the insect and it'll eat the insect. But it knows which insect to kill. It won't kill all the insects. Pollinators and others it wants to keep, it won't kill. What if it's not an insect, but some leaf or twig from a tree that falls inside? It'll count to 2, shut, and if the thing doesn't move for some period of time, it can open and release it. So it knows which to kill and which not to kill, which is quite remarkable. And it can count to 5. So if you talk to mechanical engineers, they'll say it's all mechanics, either by opening and closing. If you talk to chemical engineers, they'll say it's all chemistry because it releases a chemical to kill. If you talk to electrical engineers, it's all electrical feedback. That's what is causing this. It's a combination of all 3, actually. So there was a beautiful experiment that was done a few years ago. If it is electrical signal, it should respond to some things that humans do as well. So for example, when we go for surgery, we get anesthetic. It essentially, for a short term, shuts off the electrical circuit, so we go unconscious during surgery. When the anesthesia wears off, we come back into consciousness. Can the same thing happen in a plant? So the experiment they did was they took an anesthetic, diethyl ether, and put that in the plant. So when they anesthetize the venous flytrap, it lost its ability to open and shut. But the remarkable thing is plants don't have brains. They can have nerves, but they don't have brain. So if you don't have a brain, can you have intelligence? Of course, you can control electrical signals without a brain, but in this case, and it was a beautiful experiment that was done in Germany. And so it's a remarkable feature of this particular plant. And so the plant can count to 5, and it is able to respond to electrical signals. It is able to respond to chemicals which modify electrical signal. And things that happen in humans to a limited extent can also be imitated in a system that doesn't have a brain. So when we talk about machine intelligence and we attribute intelligence to machines, does it have intelligence if it can do all these things? So that's an interesting question. I don't have the answer to that, but I just posed the question. It's not just electrical, chemical, and mechanical signals. It's also light and touch or pressure that can trigger responses from plants, which we have not fully understood or accommodated. For example, this particular plant called Mimosa pudica, which is also known as shame plant, it has very bright colors, and depending on light and depending on touch, it can go from completely closed to completely open with very bright colors, as you see here. So touch, humidity, moisture, pressure, light, chemicals, other kinds of signals, possibly even sound, plays a major role in how plants respond and adapt. The other interesting thing is if you're trying to make a box out of paper or cardboard or wood, for example, the way we make a sharp corner in an object, in an engineering object, is we take 2 surfaces and we attach them with a glue, we weld them, we nail them, we do all kinds of things to attach 2 surfaces together. Or in the Japanese wood making, you make grooves and you insert it without any nails. Plants don't have these mechanisms, but they make sharp corners. How do plants make a fold, a 90-degree angle, a rectangle, without using all the things that we use in engineering? They use cells. So where you want a sharp corner to be, they have a different kind of cell that responds to all these stimuli, external stimuli, like water, light, touch, pressure, etc., in very different ways, and they can make shapes in unusual ways. And this is something that has a lot of engineering applications that we haven't quite tapped into. Sorry, going the wrong way. There is a plant in South America, Nyssa NASA Poisoniana. And this particular plant has a unique ability. So when insects come to draw nectar from the plant, it has the ability to remember which insect drew how much of its nectar. So it can adjust. For example, if two different species of insects come and draw two different amounts of nectar, it can adjust how much it gives the next time they come. So it has a memory to it, which is quite remarkable. So this plant is found in Peru, in South America. Then there is a whole series of behavior of plants that are quite unique. So if you take a plant series like garlic, cloves, or tulips, so if you plant them in the fall, nothing happens during the winter time, and come spring, they know how to build a layer by layer structure as tulips do. And there is a memory that's involved that lasts through different seasons, and garlic and tulips are good examples of this. Then there are plants that know the circadian rhythm. So we know that sunflower, the reason it's called sunflower is it can face itself towards the sun. But there is another plant called Malva multiflora or Cornish mallow. Apparently, it can anticipate the direction of sunrise, and as the sun moves during the course of the day, it can reorient itself. And scientists have done experiments to confuse it. So turn it the other way at night, see if it can turn in the right direction in the morning and face the east, and things like this. And it is able to do that. So it's quite remarkable. Plants have these kinds of abilities to do things. Then, how do you define intelligence? So if plants don't have a brain, can you have intelligence without a brain? So in the computer, in the artificial intelligence, we regard the chip as the brain. Our neural networks, which collectively form some kind of a brain, do plants have a brain? So if one definition of intelligence is using information from the past to make decisions for the future, if you regard that particular definition as one form of intelligence, do plants have intelligence? So nobody knows. And there is a lot of debate. It's a very controversial field, apparently, in the plant science community. If you're an avid reader, there is one book that was written a couple of years ago. It was written by a science writer for The Atlantic called Zoe Schlanger. The book is called The Light Eaters, and they have many, many examples of intelligence in plants without brain, and some that I have mentioned, some that I have not mentioned. So the purpose of this talk with that introduction is the following. We have nature's intelligence for a very long time, millennia, millions of years. In the last few decades, we have worked quite a bit to extract intelligence out of machines, or what we think is intelligence out of machines. And of course, we have innate human intelligence. So we do know that machines can hallucinate, as do ChatGPT and large language models and so forth. We definitely know that humans can hallucinate, but there is no concrete evidence that nature hallucinates. So if we can learn from nature, maybe we can minimize the collective hallucination. But if we put all three of them together, are there ways in which we can enhance the intelligence? So what I would call entangled intelligence, which is a collection of human, machine, and nature intelligence, or co-intelligence. So one type of intelligence complementing or supplementing another type of intelligence. So this is the intersection where we are at today, where things we could not have done. For example, even though we worked on biomimetics for a long time, Mitin's lab has done work in that area at the intersection of electrical engineering and sciences and even medical fields. So it's that area where we are poised maybe for the next several decades to make major leaps and advances. So we decided to create about 5-6 years. So everything I'm going to present here was done in the last 6-7 years. And So our goal is the following. Can we make new science? So one definition of the use of AI in my particular case, it's a particular definition for this work. Can I use intelligence from nature and intelligence from typical experimentation by humans, combine them together? That in itself is what we've been doing, but we can do that much faster because of the tools and technologies that are available to us. But on top of it, can I show examples where in addition I can do something with AI that I cannot do without AI today, with today's capabilities? In other words, without AI, I cannot solve a scientific problem today. So I want to show examples of that. So to me, that's one way in which AI can supplement or complement basic scientific discoveries. So that's essentially the focus of this particular work. So let me start with the three areas that I'm going to cover. An area that's completely new to me, starting about 6 years ago, is plant science. Of course, material science is a field I've worked in a long time. So my first example is from plant science. I'm going to go into some significant depth into this first part of the talk. The second part of the talk focuses on material science, and the last part, I won't go into any detail. I'll just say a few things about one particular example in biomedical applications. So by the way, these are army ants which can form a bridge at short notice using a level of intelligence that's unmatched and a level of cooperation. So one of the plant species we came across was this plant called pelargonium plant, and it has an awn of the plant which looks like this. So when it rains or when there is moisture, when it's in a wet state, it opens up, as you see on your left side. When the sun is shining bright, it can curl up and dry quite rapidly. Many plants do this, and it's very well known. So one of the things we decided, this is a collaborator of mine I met, a professor at NTU called Namjoon Cho, who's a Korean faculty member living in Singapore, trained at Stanford. And he and I met somewhat accidentally because I was, as president of NTU, I was traveling in Korea, and he was assigned to travel with me because he spoke Korean. We were meeting with senior executives from Samsung. So he came in as my translator, but we were stuck in Seoul traffic for hours. So we started to talk, and we decided we were going to start a joint project together. And that's how this whole work started about 7-8 years ago. So we decided to take inspiration from this pelargonium plant awn to see if we can create engineering materials out of this. So we were discussing what material to start with, what plant material to start with. And we realized that an unexpected source, pollen, plant pollen. So when you think of pollen, you think of sneezing and allergies. So in the springtime when the flowers come, pollen, if you ingest or smell pollen, many people have allergies and start sneezing. So you want to avoid it. But what I did not know at that time was you can go to Amazon.com and you can buy kilograms after kilograms of bags of pollen for a few dollars. I don't know how they make money out of it, but you can buy large quantities of pollen for almost nothing. And the pollen looks like this. This is a jar of sunflower pollen. You can get different types of pollen. This is sunflower pollen. So we got this. And the pollen, if you look in the microscope, it has a very strong outer layer called exine, which is so the pollen is called the diamond of the plant kingdom. It's very hard. It's almost indestructible. And it has a soft inside layer called intine. So a hard outside layer called exine, and the sharp inside layer called intine. So we thought, okay, why don't we take pollen? Because it's cheap, it's abundant, it's produced by nature, but it's allergenic. Can we do the following? First task is to make it non-allergenic. Second task is can we take a hard pollen and then convert it into a non-allergenic soft pollen, soft microgel. If you can make a microgel out of it, then it's a building block for materials. So you can make materials out of it, a natural material that we can make out of it. The other thing is, as I showed, plants are sensitive to moisture, touch, etc. Can we make whatever product we make out of it, can we make it sensitive to some stimuli like moisture or humidity or light or pressure so that it becomes an autonomous robot, self-propelling robot? Can we use it just as a concept, as a scientific concept? So my collaborator is a material chemist. So we went into the lab after the trip to Korea. We go to the lab at NTU, and so we did some literature search. One of the well-known processes is soap making, just like you make soap. Can we make pollen and go through a process which is very similar to soap making, where you use potassium hydroxide at some concentration at some temperature and time? By controlling the temperature and the time and the concentration, you can process the pollen material. So my colleagues, they process the pollen, and out comes a microgel, which turns out to be non-allergenic. So once we had the microgel, we thought, okay, we are now in business. How do we create different objects out of it? So the question is, what object do we create? It's a group of students working in a lab. So we decided that we're going to make paper out of it. Instead of A4 paper made out of wood, so you cut trees, you chop wood, and you make you make paper. Why don't we make paper out of pollen? So you can take the microgel and you can cast it into a paper, like an A4 size paper, and you feed it into a printer. It can be an inkjet printer or a laser printer. And so you have an engineering object out of pollen. So this is pollen paper. The second thing we realize is this paper is sensitive to moisture. So by changing humidity, you can change the shape of the paper. By changing the shape, you can digitally design different shapes, and you can create objects out of it. And by changing the humidity, you can make it move, because it's a humidity-driven motion and humidity-driven shape change. So this opens up a new window for us. Of course, you want to make sure if you print something on it and you walk out of the building and it starts to drizzle, your paper doesn't go bad or what you print on it. So there are ways to avoid it. I'll come to that in a minute. So we decided to do this. How do you prove it? How do you prove you can do this? So we go back to material science, especially to semiconductor technology. So let's think of the following example. When we make a computer chip, this is what we do. We take a silicon wafer, which is very flat. It's about 12 inches or so a wafer. This is what companies like Intel, TSMC, and Samsung do. It's perfectly flat. Now let's say you want to deposit a copper film on top of it. So you take it to a slightly high temperature, you deposit copper on top of it. So you have a copper film, continuous film, on a silicon substrate. And you're doing it at a slightly high temperature. So when you cool down from the high temperature to room temperature, copper contracts because you're lowering the temperature. Silicon contracts differentially. So you have two materials that are bonded together. When you heat, they expand. When you cool, they contract. If they differentially expand or contract, an initially flat wafer will not be flat anymore. It will curve. So when one layer deforms differently than a different layer, you get a curvature, you get a shape change. If that is the case, here we can use the same principle from material science or engineering to create some interesting things. So I take a strip of pollen paper that you see here, I feed it into a printer, I just print lines on it. You can take a word program and draw a few lines, feed the printer, and it doesn't matter whether it's laser printer or inkjet printer, you feed it into this. Now, I want to do a really clean experiment in the lab. So what I do is I keep the thickness of the line same. That means the font size in the printer is the same. I keep the spacing between the line the same. I keep the color of the ink the same. Everything is fixed. The only thing I change is the angle of the line with respect to the length of the strip. That angle is called theta. So I'm going to do 4 experiments. So I take a strip of this pollen paper, I print a line on it. I have theta of 0, 30, 60, and 90 degrees. That's what that looks like on the right. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is take this strip of paper, I'm going to change the humidity. I'm going to go from 70% to 20% humidity. All I do is I dip it into a humid chamber, change the moisture, and see what happens. My hypothesis, before I do the experiment, all scientific things need a good hypothesis. My hypothesis is when you increase the humidity, moisture will be absorbed by the pollen paper, so it'll swell, it'll expand, but the line will be unaffected. The ink will be unaffected by moisture. So one paper expands, the line doesn't expand, so there'll be a change of shape. And therefore, when you go from 0 to 30 to 60 to 90, the paper has to curl or deform differently, change its shape differently. This is our scientific theory. Is it true? So let's check it out. So I'm going to show you a video. The first video is what happens when you change the humidity. So let's see if the video works. Okay. This is 30 degrees. When I change the humidity, it curls automatically like this. Just by changing humidity, nothing else. 60 degrees, it does this. 90 degrees, it's completely different. All I did was change the orientation of the line. Everything else is identical. So now, this was done in Singapore, so we decided, okay, can we digitally design very complex objects using this principle, including creating corners. So Singapore's national flower is the orchid. So the challenge to the students, as you see in your bottom left, to create that organically using pollen paper, but you have to create different shapes for the orchid leaves. So you can see at the top, they have different orientations of the lines attached together in different ways, printed on a piece of paper. You can digitally design all of this. And very quickly, the students are very clever. Within a day and a half, they came back and said, here is your orchid. I can create a digital orchid out of this. So that was very interesting. So I mentioned earlier that plants don't use glue or nail or any of these things to create sharp corners. So we decided we want to make a box out of pollen paper, our pollen microgel paper. So how do you create a box? How do you create a corner? We're going to learn from plants, and we're going to do exactly what plants do. So they don't use corners, they don't use glue. So we printed lines where the corner should be, where the fold occurs, and just change the humidity. Okay? So see if we can create a box. So we created just a sheet of pollen paper. We cut the corners to create folds, and then see if it can fold itself based on humidity. So here is the video of that. So low humidity. So this video is sped up 32 times for the PowerPoint. You can see how it folds at the corner where the print is. Now if you go to high humidity, it opens up. So you could ask the question, okay, I make a box out of it. It automatically folds. I ship it by FedEx from Boston to Arizona, where the humidity automatically changes. Will my box disintegrate? Good question. So what we can do in that case is you can actually coat it with an organic coating. For example, if you shrimp, lobster, etc., have a particular type of chitosan type of coating, can actually freeze the shape and make it impervious to moisture. So this is another thing we can automatically do. So you can make a box, have it fold, and then automatically remove, put a coating which makes it immune to further change in moisture. So you can ship it and you can undo it. So So this is an interesting discovery that we had. Then if you print on a piece of paper, will you lose your image if moisture changes? You can actually put a coating on it. So because it was sunflower pollen paper, we decided to print Van Gogh's sunflower picture on it. Now the paper is a little bit beige because we didn't bleach the paper. We could have easily done what people do. So when you buy printing paper from the store, it's white. The reason it's white is because bleached. There's a chemical used for it. We could have used the chemical. We didn't want to use it. There are other ways of doing it. So it's the way in which the pollen paper was created, and we printed sunflower on it. You can put coating so that it's now immune to moisture. So here is an example of it. You can actually dip it in water for a long period of time, and your image will not change. So you can keep the image in the paper. So then we decided, okay, cybersecurity is very important, but we still need to print documents for legal reasons. How do you ensure both? The way we do this now for cybersecurity is we shred the paper, but that's wasting paper and wasting trees. Can we actually take a paper, print on it, then unprint it, and then use the same paper to print again, over and over again, so that you preserve the mechanical integrity of the paper and you don't waste paper? Is that possible? Okay, we decided to try it. We gave it as a challenge, and these smart students, they came back a few days later, and they showed us how to do this. So here, for example, is sunflower pollen with Van Gogh sunflower printed on it. You essentially get all the printing out of it. Then you dip it in ethanol, and you get your paper back. So now we did this experiment. We started 0 hours or 12 o'clock with plain paper. We print Van Gogh on it. Then we unprint it. At 6 o'clock, we get the same clean paper back. Then we print Mona Lisa, and then we unprint Mona Lisa, and then go back. So we did that 9 cycles, back and forth. You can still hold the paper. So this is a poor man's version of cybersecurity. You can unprint whatever you print once you use it. There are a few other applications I want to mention. One is when we go for electrocardiogram in the hospital, they stick all these plastic things on your 7 or 8 probes to connect the electrodes to it. They measure your electric pulses from your heart. And this plastic, it's done millions of times all over the world, and it's plastic that's thrown away after each electrocardiogram. So we created a pollen substrate that you can stick on your chest or stomach, etc., or a leg, and measure the electrical signal. And so we had a volunteer who went for the regular electrocardiogram in the usual way, and then we had the pollen electrocardiogram substrate, and you can see the signals are identical. And so things like these kinds of small-scale applications, there is quite a bit of advantage. There are 2 other applications I want to mention. One is creating a pollen sponge. So if there is an oil spill, a large oil spill, pollen sponge can absorb oil much faster than conventional sponges. So there is a paper written a few years ago about this, based on this work on how to use pollen sponge to clean up oil spills. Another application in medicine is deep wound surgery. So if you had a bullet wound or a deep surgery, and they put blood absorbing sponges in the body and then remove them. So pollen sponges can potentially have 2 advantages. One is nature-made material, and secondly, it can absorb blood faster after surgery. So this has been, there are no human trials done on this. This has been done in mice experiments, and it does show that you can absorb the post-surgery recovery is much faster in terms of absorption than conventional techniques. And this is the last slide that I want to show on this, almost as a joke, I once asked one of the students, this is with a different collaborator, Jimmy Shaw, and Dominic Villa is a professor at Oxford. We were sitting at a restaurant and talking about this work. So I asked one of the postdocs, we were sitting under an umbrella, but it was bright sunshine. Suppose there is a drop of rain. Can the umbrella automatically sense the rain and open up? So you don't have to move inside the restaurant, and the waiter doesn't have to come and to open the umbrella. Can you create an umbrella that will do this? Within a week, they produced this. So this is a microgel with some strips on it. So you can see it's flat. By changing the humidity, you can actually create an umbrella-like feature, open umbrella versus closed umbrella, and it can be made automatic. So this is just a small set of examples of how we can use nature for engineering devices in ways in which it may not be obvious. Now, I come to the machine intelligence part of it. So Marcus Buehler, who is a professor at MIT, he and one of his students and I have been working for the last 2 years, Rachel Liu, and this is part of her PhD thesis. So we took all my work from Singapore in the plant science experiments. We gave it to her, gave the paper to her. Using a large language model, she fed all the papers and a few books that we recommended to the program. Then we asked the program, design experiments for us with this background that we haven't thought of. And again, as an experimentalist, I don't trust anything anybody tells. I don't trust myself. I don't trust what my students tell me. It's good to have a healthy skepticism. I definitely don't trust the LLM program. So if LLM gives me a recommendation on how to do an experiment, we are going to go to the lab and do the experiment, see if it works. So we created a multi-agent system. I won't go into the details of this in the interest of time. And we fed about 80 papers to this large language model. And as the model, we gave some prompts to guide us in designing an experiment. In the next slide, sorry. So we asked the model, give us different types of coatings that we can use that we haven't thought of. It actually came up with paraffin wax-treated coating as one example, which we never thought of. So we tried it, it more or less worked. Then we asked it to suggest other types of experiments we could do. Instead of printing lines, it suggested to us to design leaf-like structures, which actually worked very well. But it also made some dumb mistakes. So I want to show you the mistakes it made. So it told us to print on both sides, which doesn't work for shape optimization. We know that because we have intuition and we have done this and it hasn't worked for somebody and who told us, and therefore we know not to do it. But machines don't know that unless you tell it. And nobody told the machine not to print on both sides. So there are things like this that it recommends that will never work. So the lesson learned from this is there are a lot of human failures in experiments, scientific experiments, in clinical trials, etc., which are never published. So no journal will accept a paper of failed experiments, and no drug company will admit to clinical trial failures and the secrets behind them. They're all gone for once and for all. But if only we fed them to an AI program, all the failures, we can make the program much smarter, because that's what has taught us the accumulated wisdom, and that machines lack today. In fact, when I was NSF director, I recommended to NIH to fund a large program on all the biology experiments that failed, so that we can archive that and make it public, so that everybody can understand. That unfortunately it never got funded. But it's going to be very critical for science to address that. So this is an area where we can make significant progress. I can take the entire field of plant science, I can take the entire field of solid mechanics and material science. I can ask the program, tell me all the structures that plants have built that are mechanically sound, that can be used in engineering design, and the inferences that can come out of it can be tested. And a machine can do it much faster today than a human can, but without the benefit of failures and lessons learned from it. So I want to move to the second part, and I will make it shorter in the second part and then I'll finish with the third part. I move from plants in nature to the hardest material found in nature, which is diamond. So diamond is the hardest materials in nature. So if you were to buy a piece of diamond, it is going to, depending on the purity of the diamond, let's say you have the money to buy a little cylinder of diamond, which is very pure, and you pull on the diamond to do a test. As you stretch the diamond, it'll stretch elastically and then it'll abruptly break. So it has no plasticity. It's what is called, it'll be linear elastic. It'll strain by a very small amount and then it'll catastrophically fail. And we know that very well from numerous experiments. But when nanomaterials funding started in the US around 1999, 2000, there was a lot of research funding by the Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, and many others. So one of the things we learned over 25 years is that materials in nanoscale behave very differently from materials in micro and macro scale. So if I take a piece of diamond this big and mechanically deform it, versus a piece of diamond that's micro scale, let's say the thickness of the human hair, I mechanically deform it, the macro and the micro will behave very similarly. But if I make the piece of diamond 1/100th of the thickness of the human hair and try to deform it, intuition tells me that the nano diamond will behave differently than micro and macro diamond because it has fewer defects per unit volume. Its surface to volume ratio is different. Defects can escape at the surface, and these chemical processes will be different. So somehow something different had to happen, but we had no idea what was going to happen. So about 5-6 years ago, one of my postdocs, Yang Lu, is now a professor in Hong Kong. He created a series of diamond needles on a silicon substrate in the lab. So what he did was he took silicon and then he made diamond needles sticking out of the silicon using a deposition process. These are synthetic diamond. So he created these needles, and you can see the size of the needles. The thickness of the needle is about 1/100th of the thickness of our hair. Okay, so it's like 70, 80 nanometers, maybe 100 to 1,000 of the thickness of the human hair. They are about 200 nanometers long, so you cannot see it with the naked eye. You have to look at it in the microscope. So we postulated that nano diamond has to behave differently than micro and macro diamond, but we didn't know what. So Yang called one day and said, what do I do with this experiment? So we recommended that you do the following. So you have a diamond needle here sticking up, and you come with another diamond. So if you put it in a nano indenter or an atomic force microscope, you come with another diamond, you see if you can bend it. So we suggested to him, you come down with another diamond, we cannot stretch it, try to bend it. If you bend it a little bit, don't break it. If it bends a little bit, go back and retract. Go again now, bend it a little bit more, make a video of your experiment, keep doing it, keep repeating it until something happens. And we had no idea what was going to happen. So this is at room temperature, normal experimental condition, diamond. And so what I'm going to show you now is the experiment we did, a video of the experiment. So on the left, you have the real experiment inside the microscope. You can actually bend the diamond. On the right, because diamond is elastic, it's non-linear elastic, we can actually do a full computer simulation of the whole experiment in the lab. So left is experiment, right is computer simulation. And the color contours that you see, the different colors, are colors of maximum strain. So the place where the diamond is most bent, which is on the outer fiber, the strain is 9%, which is because if you normally try to strain diamond, the strain is 0.1% for macro diamond. For nano diamond, is actually 9%. We didn't believe the experiment, so we sent it to Science, and 3 reviewers came back and said, you know, interesting, but can you show this? Is it real diamond? Go in the atomic level microscope, show atom by atom. There is no coating. There are no defects here. So we had to do a whole range of additional experiments, and the paper got published in 2018. So in 2019, a group in China, in Hangzhou, decided to see if they could reproduce our experiments. So they bought actual diamond, single crystal. So you know the orientation of the crystal. They used focused ion beam to cut the crystal into nano pillars, and they built this device to see if they can pull it, twist it, bend it, similar to what we did. And they found that the point at which it breaks has a strain of about 9.3%. So we found 9%, they found 9.3 or 9.4%. So they independently confirmed our experiments. So now you can do it in single crystal or polycrystal for those who are in material science. So here is an example. Let me see if this works. Yeah. When it fails catastrophically. You can see how it breaks in the middle. So we established that you can actually create a large strain. Now let's think about this. When we published this, there was a lot of news media attention on this because it was diamond and because it was a paper published in Science, the combination of the two. So one of the reporters asked me, okay, you can bend diamond now. So what? What do you do with it? It's a very good question. So that got us thinking. So the idea was this: if you can, diamond is not only the hardest material found in nature, it is also an electronic material. So diamond, unfortunately, is a better electronic material than silicon, but is useless because it's not manufacturable. But it has a band gap of 5.6 electron volts. It's an ultra-wide band gap material. So this is the experiment that the Chinese did, reproducing our experiment, and you can see 9.4% strain is what they found, similar to our experiment. So this shows the electronic properties of diamond. So on the vertical axis, you have band gap. All the semiconductor materials that you use are plotted here. This is a review paper by a Japanese author. Diamond is on your left here. Silicon is here. Silicon has a band gap of 1.2 electron volts. Diamond has a band gap of 5.6. Compound semiconductors are in this range. And the wavelength of light also changes depending on the band gap map here. And by changing this, you can change the color of light. So one of the things about diamond is if you mechanically compress it and you change its band gap, you also change its color. So the holy grail question is, can you do mechanically just deform diamond and make the band gap go from here to here so that it behaves like other semiconductor materials? If you can do that, here is the ultimate test. Can you make the band gap of diamond go from here to 0 so that it becomes a metallic conductor? How do you do this? So in order to do this, mechanical strain is a 6-dimensional tensor. So you have 3 normal strains and 3 shear strains. And to do the calculations for all possible combinations will take the toughest supercomputer to do, and it's impossible to do given the resources we have today. So this brings me to the question, if we can do it with AI, we cannot do it any other way today, what I'm going to show you next. So we decided to embark on that project with one of my former students, former postdocs, who's now a professor at MIT, Ju Lee, who does computational simulation. So after our paper came out, I contacted him. So we decided to do the following. We do 1,000 density DFT calculations of diamond deformation. We feed it into a neural networks program. We scan all possible strain combinations, and we have to make sure that diamond doesn't undergo phase transformation into graphite. And then we create a map of all the strain states and show where band gap of diamond can go from 5.6 to 2.3 to 0. And we can also distinguish between direct and indirect band gap. So this took a couple of years and a couple of very smart PhD students. And let me show you the results. So on the top left is the actual experiment we did bending diamond needles. And then the left, the red bent diagram is the compressive strain. When we bend in, we plot the compressive strain. The next one is the tension strain. The green one is the band gap. And you can see on the inside and outside of the bent diamond, you see a brown color. That brown color is zero band gap. So what is interesting about this is that you are changing the band gap of diamond, one of the hardest materials and the highest band gap electrical property material. You are changing its band gap from 5.6 to 0, almost like a metal, without any change in chemistry. It's purely mechanical. So that's the first one. The second is that you cannot do this without AI today. So these are the two things that came out of this. It also turns out that diamond is a unique material for thermal conductivity. You can change the thermal conductivity by orders of magnitude by mechanical deformation. And this is something we've done. We've done additional experiments that are not published yet, but I can mention that when you can also do high pressure experiment, and you can see change in color during the high pressure experiments. And from that you can infer a change in band gap. You can do a number of things, and this is something we have done as well. And then there are a lot of details. We can create three-dimensional map. This is about 3 years of computational work involving several PhD students. So we published a paper called Metallization of Diamond in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences about 5 years ago. So this is the work from that paper. So let me finish off with 2 slides on the last topic. So I've shown the plant science and the material science. Let me go to the last topic. Again, I won't go into any details here other than to show the application. Can we bring in AI in interesting applications? So one application is using multi-fidelity and multimodality approaches for a particular problem. With the rise in diabetes, one of the diseases associated with diabetes is diabetic retinopathy. So in the eye, you see these in the microvasculature, you see these bulge-like features that form in the blood vessels in the eye, that as diabetes gets worse, these become larger and larger, and as a result, eventually it can lead to blindness in severe cases. So what we decided to do was first to, using a computer chip technology, build a microfluidic device where we go to the hospital. This is with a protocol in Singapore. We get blood from a diabetic patient. This is blood from a diabetic patient flowing through a microfluidic device in the lab. And we can create different bulges of different sizes to simulate the severity of the disease. On top of it, we can get image from the patient's doctor, feed it into the program. Out of this, we can predict the pressure difference, the velocity, the friction, the flow rate, and so many things quantitatively. Using that, we can calibrate, connect it to the clinical data, try to see if we can predict the progression of the disease using AI. So we call this artificial intelligence velocimetry, and we published this, and we had some collaboration with the Eye Institute of Singapore, and this is in collaboration with a professor at Brown University who works in AI, George Karniadakis. And so this is another example. These are images of these features from the patient's eye. So out comes from these a very detailed engineering map of what these features lead to in the case of diabetic retinopathy. And we try to calibrate this and then connect it to the disease state itself. Let me finish with the last slide here, that one of the other diseases that I've studied in my biomedical work is also hereditary blood disorders and infectious disease. So here is, for example, a healthy red blood cell. The toughest mechanical fitness test for a blood cell in the human body is the human spleen, which is near the pancreas. In the spleen, there is an opening called the interendothelial slit. If the blood cell cannot squeeze through this, then you get a problem. And different types of blood disorders, from malaria to sickle cell disease to spherocytosis to elliptocytosis, have different symptoms in the spleen, different signatures. This is very well known. So here what we are doing is, because the computational power is very large, we can create a computer model of an individual red blood cell with all the spectrin molecules in it, and then we can simulate how it goes through that slit, and we can capture the shape of what comes out. And remarkably, what we predict in the computer for different diseases, from healthy to sickle cell disease to spherocytosis to elliptocytosis, you have hundreds of thousands of pictures from patients in clinical data. So we can rationalize them with computational model. Now, this is without any AI yet. And AI provides an additional opportunity to interpret this in ways in which we have not been able to do for blood disorders. So this is another application. So with this, let me conclude. And sorry. So this is these are starling birds that do a dance at sunset, and they do it only at sunset, and there are thousands of them. So birds behave in a particular way for a particular reason. The mechanism behind this is not fully understood. So this picture was taken in England. You can go to YouTube, you can Google, and you'll ask for starling dance at sunset. You'll get hundreds and hundreds of videos online. And this is one of them. And the remarkable thing about this is nature does things for a particular reason that we still don't understand. And there is a lot of these kinds of questions. I put this particular one here because these kinds of questions, AI is ripe for these kinds of things to go across disciplines to make connections. So essentially, the conclusion of this work is the intersection of nature intelligence and machine intelligence combined with human intelligence, and potentially checks and balances on hallucinations. The whole idea of not only intelligence but consciousness in plants and animals. So do you need a brain to have intelligence? So what does artificial intelligence mean? And how do you define intelligence? So I gave examples of plant species where you get different types of intelligence. Potential pathways using co-intelligence, and the diamond example we couldn't have shown a change in band gap without change in chemistry, without AI. So that's a particular example. And lastly, there are a variety of approaches in material science that we can bring in along with AI and computer science to advance different branches of science. And we already see this with Google DeepMind and the Nobel Prizes that are being given for AI. There is a tremendous opportunity in this. But the interesting question about all of this is scientific progress. Is it going to depend on computing power or AI investment? So if you have more AI investment, do you have greater opportunity at scientific discovery than otherwise? It poses a lot of very interesting questions that I won't go into. So let me stop at this point. Thank you very much.